All right, folks, welcome back to another installment of MEA 425 Media Copyright and Licensing, the online edition. Pretty exciting. I'm actually outside today. Hopefully, I won't be mauled by a bear or, I don't know, what else is dangerous out here? Nobody knows. So, we're looking at print publishing today as the first division, I guess you could say, of licensing revenue by license type. It's standard to start with print publishing, I would say, because it's the oldest form of publishing, and so it makes sense from at least a chronological point of view. So we will take a look. Oh my goodness, there we go. We will have a sort of historical introduction, I guess, to the topic of print publishing, so we can have a sense of not only how print publishing arises as part of the um, effort to capitalize on creativity in music, but the entire enterprise of the music publisher as well. Then we'll look at the types of printed music and you know even across the digital divide. So we'll look starting at the most common print versions and how much those licenses are worth, how they're structured. And then we'll also look at the digital side. You can see down here on the grant of rights side, we will also look at the rights that are from the bundle of rights that the publisher has. As soon as the songwriter signs up with the publisher, that entire copyright goes over along with all of the bundle. And there are certain rights within that bundle that are sort of triggered in various scenarios. So print music is going to trigger specific rights, and that's important to know because it's the job of the license has to spell all of that out. And so not just how it's going to be used, but which of the rights from the bundle are triggered, and those rights have to be granted. And so that's taking you back to the music publishing pipeline. You remember the flow of rights going across the top, and then there's the purchase on this side, and then the flow of royalties coming back across the bottom. So let's get started. Okay, in terms of the historical context, we've already talked a little bit about the importance of the 15th century. So we've got the Gutenberg press, and that really was a game changer for all of reproduction of intellectual property. And music was, of course, one of those, and had been since. And I love this monk, the monk of Darezza, but his name is Guido. Pretty sweet. It's like that's the monk you don't want to mess with in the monastery. It's like, Guido found out what you're trying to take his music. Anyway, Guido is considered to be the first monk that came up with this idea of being able to write music as a language, and that language is referred to as musical notation. And so this is, around the year 900 or 1000. And so you've got, emperors like Charlemagne in the picture. And Charlemagne appreciated the Gregorian chant. So Gregory was a pope from a couple centuries before that had this style of singing that became, very popular. And that's over 1,000 years ago. Wild. Okay, so just kind of tripping out on that for a second. And then you go through the Gutenberg press, 1400s, and now you've got the idea of mass reproduction. And so the dollar figures associated with that, or the remuneration, I guess you could say, whatever type of pay, also goes up because you can make a lot more copies a lot faster with this whole movable type, using a wine press actually to press down ink onto a page instead of extracting grape juice from grapes. That's the backstory on the printing press. Less than 100 years after, we've got the very first English songbook published by Winking de Word. You know, you get with 16th century names, I got no idea if that's like the publisher or a pen name of a person. Good old Winking de Word. Gotta love history. Um, so the first book published in the United States. Now we're talking about the late 18th century, so 1700s. Um, was the Psalms of David. Now that may have been done. I don't have a year on that, but that may have been done prior to. That may have been done in the 1600s, um, before the U.S. Revolution, you know, and American independence. But the important part is not the date, but just recognizing that we've got sort of this religious theme, right? The Psalms of David was, you know, a big sort of way for the Protestant community that started the United States to identify, you know, their values and things. Um, and so that's that moment in history. And then, um, you know, as we've mentioned before, the ways of doing things in the music business, especially from the licensor's point of view, change by virtue of technology. So, in new ways of making copies, just like you know, the monk was writing by hand, and then this guy's like, "Hey, I've got this grape smasher that I turned into a book printer." Right? They're like, "Wow, that's pretty intense. It's like new technology." Um, and then of course we go through Edison's cylinder and, you know, the 45 or the 33 RPM vinyl record, and then magnetic tape, the 8 track, you know, on down the line to the CD, MP3, etc. Um, and so the march of technology, of course, is going to eclipse or render, you know, less valuable in any case, um, print publishing as the leading form of music licensing. But before that happened, you know, in the early 20th century, so after the song "After the Ball" came out, around just before the year 1900, the hit songs of the day, you know, before we get into the records era, so, you know, around the first 20 years, so 1900 to 1920, a hit song could make $2 million in sheet music sales alone. And so, adjust for inflation, that's, you know, probably 1/10 or 10 times larger. That might be, you know, $20 million worth in today's um, the value of today's dollar. Okay, so the printing license. What in the world is actually even covered? So, a printing license gives permission or covers the right to print copies of musical notation and or lyrics. So you remember the notation is the you know, the lines, the 5 lines, and you've got the dots with the, you know, that indicate what notes in the scale, right? That's music. So music or written music is also known as musical notation, and then that's accompanied with lyrics. And so you can have just the notation, just the lyrics, or the combination of the two. All are covered by a print license, and that's going to appear in, you know, a single song. That would be sheet music for a song, but you may have a collection of songs, like the, you know, sheet music for an entire album by Led Zeppelin or whomever. Um, or it could be like disco hits of the 70s, right? That would be a folio edition for a theme. So you can have different collections, and that's called a folio. And then you may have educational editions, so how to play the piano, or concert arrangements of, you know, Bach's Moonlight or Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. I think, isn't that in C sharp minor? I think it may be. Is you know, another type of, you know, it would be a score for multiple instruments. Now the Moonlight Sonata is not a great example because that's for piano only, but when you have an arrangement that you've got, you know, 4 strings, or you may have a full symphony orchestra, then, you know, it becomes rather complicated to score for all of those voices because those instruments can be in different keys, et cetera, et cetera. Reprints of the lyrics in books, magazines, advertisements that have, you know, a line of a song, that's not uncommon. And so those are the type of things that's traditionally covered by a print license. Now you've got digital print licenses that, in the post-digital revolution era, more people are going to, search for lyrics with like Grace Note, or online through their phone with an application or an app. Sorry, I don't mean to sound like my grandparents. Um, Sheet music, lyrics and lyric databases, anything that appears online. Guitar tablature, also very big. And so that's a slightly modified kind of a license. We'll get into those a little bit later. Now, how do print publishers actually operate? So, print publication as a business form, you've got internal affairs on the left and then external affairs. So, the internal affairs will be, acquiring talent or not necessarily talent, but properties, right? So they're looking at what's popular now, what's most likely going to sell. So they'll check out the radio and different genres or sales, music consumption databases indicate, who's buying what, and they'll make a bet that this is probably what is going to appeal to our customer base. So they'll make a choice of whatever song in the top 10 in the genres that they represent. So they'll reach out to the publisher, the music publisher that represents that those materials, and they'll work out the deal. So when the deal happens, right, and this is a print license, is the deal that represents an acquisition of property, and they can be the exclusive. They can have um, access to that property on an exclusive basis, meaning none of the other print publishers can do it, and you tend to see that in like artist deals or special folio. If you're gonna have like greatest hits of David Bowie, then you may have that's more likely going to be an exclusive rights deal because they don't want some other print company to have even greater hits of David Bowie. That's not going to do great for business. And so they'll acquire, through the licensing, access to the properties, and then they'll go ahead and do their print. And I'll show you how that works here in a second. And then on the external side, of course, it's all about promotion and sales. And sales also implying distribution, which would be physical or digital, depending. Okay, so how does the process go? So first, they're going to scout and contract properties as long as they're, quote, free and clear, meaning that they're not legally encumbered, which means that they are not also licensed to another, exclusively, or there's no other claim to that property through license or even maybe an assignment to another publisher. So they have to make sure that they can actually get access. And that's, if they can, it's known as a property that is free and clear. So it's able to be licensed, in other words. Then they'll register for a copyright, not exactly of that song, but this is going to be a derivative form of the copyright. And so that means that the print publisher has its own copyright that exists along with and next to the original copyright of the original composition. And so that just means that the sheet music notation that you see, whether it's online or physical, is just a version of that original that is a version that's based on the original. Then they'll draft what's referred to as a lead sheet, typically for voice and for piano. So either voice and piano or just accompaniment, which would be like the chord changes, and then the melody, which could be whatever instrument is carrying the melody. The lead sheet would have the melody and the accompanying sort of the accompaniment. And then finally, so that would be drafted out. So they do a draft and then, make edits and check for, does it flow the way we want it to? And that may be based on referring to the recording that's on the radio or versions that are sung in church or, but they do have a sort of editorial license there to modify, because once again, this is a derivative of the original. So they can change the original song slightly. Especially if they want to put it in a new key, for example, or change lyrics around, gender of lyrics from he to she, stuff like that. And then printing, and then distributing, shipping, or online distribution. So that's the kind of the job of the print publisher as a business, as part of the music business. The rights that are embedded in a print license. So of course you've got 4Ds and a P, Reproduction there should actually be duplication. So these are all four Ds. You'll be excited to see DUPLIC. Okay. Um, Derivative is also known as adaptation. So you've got these synonym terms here, reproduction and duplication. These are synonyms. So don't be thrown by that. These do come back to the bundle of rights. So that's important. That's why we started with the bundle of rights. So you can see that each of these licenses are going to pull on and activate certain rights from the bundle. And so here we've got duplication, derivative to make this new form, and then the right to display, and the right to distribute. A couple important notes here is, well, first of all, the license has to spell out which of the rights are activated from the bundle and how they, what they imply in terms of the way that the licensee is going to use the property. And then, how they're limited, and that usually means, are they limited geographically in terms of territory? Are they limited in terms of time? So time and space, right? These are the main sort of ways that a license will be limited. It'll be like a 2 or 3 year license that's good for just the United States, right? So that's basically predicated on the idea that if you give everything away, then you're not making as much money off of the property as you could. So the more you sort of divide it by time, if you give it to them for a year, then they have to come back and get a new license, and the terms can change based on demand. So it's just good business practice to limit the licenses. And then, another note is that karaoke licenses are more complex because you also have synchronization. So the song's going to be playing, the recording will play, but then the lyrics have to flow across that screen. So the singer can, time their delivery with the song. And then there's also a performance aspect here. And so the karaoke license is a little bit more expensive because it's doing more stuff, right? Okay, granting rights. So we want to look at what rights are flowing from the songwriter / composer to the publisher, who's the middle person, right? And then the publisher is going to turn around and grant rights to the print music distributors. And so that's what we're calling the print publisher. Music publisher is in the middle, and then the print publisher is the music user, and then they're going to sell sheet music and these folio editions as the product to the consumer, whose purchase will trigger the flow of royalties back to the ownership. So from songwriter composer to publisher, that's an easy one because the song, and that's going to be the same on all of these different licenses. When the songwriter signs a music publishing deal, right, with the music publisher, that deal stipulates 9 times out of 10 that the full copyright and all of the rights in the bundle are being transferred and assigned away from the songwriter to the music publisher, who becomes the owner of that copyright for the length of that license. So it may be for the life of the copyright, it could be for 50 years, that depends on the negotiation. And the standard here, is that the publisher is going to agree that the songwriter will earn about 5 cents a copy of sheet music, or 10 to 15% of retail for folio editions. And so those are the standard licensing rates for print. We'll look at what happens to digital here in a second. Now, when the publisher, who has the copyright now, once the songwriter signs with the publisher, that basically they're signing away that copyright for the term of that license or that contract, then the publisher is going to be in a position to license out those rights. That's their job, right? And so, the publisher is going to then license out rights to your big music distributors for sheet music like Hal Leonard or Alfred Music, or some of your digital sites like Grace Note for lyric reproductions, or different guitar tablature sites if you want to look at, guitar chords for a song. And so those are going to be done usually 3 years, 3 to 5 year deals. Typically, that'll be just for the U.S. and Canada because we're neighbors. It's North America, but it's also the same language, so there's no translation that's required there to get it, because Mexico's considered part of North America. So this is not a deal for North America. These deals are done usually for just U.S. and Canada. And there's been a trend. These historically have not been exclusive deals. meaning that multiple publishers could, put out sheet music to a hit song. Um, but the trend has been, because sheet music is earning less money as technology moves on. You've got all these other ways to earn money. The the publishers that have these catalogs of songs look at sheet music and they're like, we're not going to deal with this on a song by song basis and exclusive, non exclusive license, meaning we've got a lot of administrative work going on here. They want to do it in one shot now. And so they're saying, okay, we're going to license you as the exclusive print music publisher for our entire catalog. And so those can be, several $1 million deals. Um, but it is, and then it's up to the print publisher to decide how they want to package that catalog. They'll obviously won't do everything in the catalog depending on how large the catalog is, but there'll be certain artists, after Prince passed away, or David Bowie, you've got more demand there, right? There's that kind of nostalgia thing kicking in, so they'll be in a position to choose. We want to do a folio of Prince greatest hits or whatever that is. Outside of this question of the sort of trend of the major music publishers licensing their entire catalog to a major print music publisher, the only time that exclusivity has been common has been for personality folios, like we mentioned before. You don't want to have two different editions of David Bowie's greatest hits out at the same time. That's just bad business. Now, advice for sheet music publishers is to, the music publishers for their lyrics to remain non-exclusive. So if the music goes out exclusively, the lyrics should remain non-exclusive because they represent additional licensing opportunities for, say, commercials or lyric reprints in magazines, etc. Okay, so that's the grant of rights there. When it comes down to digital print licensing, basically you just take whatever the sheet music standard rate was and double it. So it was 10 to 15%. So 12.5% was a typical royalty rate for folios. And when those folios went online, for duplication, you could download like an ebook or whatever and have that entire collection of sheet music. The value of that doubled from 12.5% that the sheet music publisher is paying to the music publisher, that the music publisher will then split between themselves and the songwriter / composer, right? So the digital domain, a little less secure, and a little bit more demand. And so both of those things together ended up doubling that rate. And so the 12.5% is for print folios, 25% of retail, would be for the online version or the digital version. Guitar tabs and lyric databases, like Grace Note, for example, that was used by, if you downloaded a record or uploaded a CD, for example, in the early days of iTunes, Grace Note would search for, the song titles, and so it's basically a lyric and song title for print type of service there. But those typically are 3-year deals there between the publisher and, say, Grace Note, and they'll take an advance, or they'll pay out an advance that is against 50% of gross receipts. And the way gross receipts, so this is not net, right? This is every hit or view represents a certain amount of value. And so that multiplied by how many times a song was hit or viewed or accessed over, the accounting period, may be a month, might be 6 months, that ends up resulting in a sort of gross revenue. Gross meaning that it's not net. And so there's no expenses on the user side that can be deducted, like, we have to pay for online service or whatever it is. Those are gross receipts. And I think that is it, folks. So that's a look at how print licensing works. That, along with the introduction that has been provided by our students, as well as looking at the flow of music business and the technology. This is going to get us sort of on track for the second phase of the class where we're looking at these individual license types. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and we will be wrapping later, folks. Take it easy. Bye.